Welcome to the course on Adobe Flash. My name is Tom and I'll be taking you through all the essential aspects of using Adobe Flash Professional software. The course is divided into 4 sections. In the first section I'll be introducing you to Flash and Actionscript programming. I'll start by showing you how to download and install Adobe Flash Professional software onto your computer. I will introduce you to its basic features, and I'll show you how to use it to create your first Flash applications. In section 2, we'll be moving on to looking at drawing tools available in Flash Professional, and also how to use it to create animations. In section 3, we'll be learning more about ActionScript programming, and by the end of that section, we'll be able to make a simple game. In section 4, we'll be learning more about ActionScript programming. We will make a more advanced game, and I'll also leave you with a final project to do yourself. So I'd just like to show you the game I'll be showing you how to build in section 4. So it's a sliding tiles game. When you click on New Game, the tiles are shuffled. And the idea is that you rearrange the tiles to recreate the original picture. So by the end of the course, you will know how this particular application has been put together. So I'd like to give you some more details about how the course is structured. Many lessons have files associated with them. For example, this particular lesson will have the presentation I'm currently showing you associated with it as a file. Some lessons will also have code associated with them, and you'll be able to find these files on the Eduonix website associated with this course. You will also need to install the Open Sans font in order to be able to open the FLA files, that's the code files, provided with this course. I'll just show you how to do that. So you'll be able to get the Open Sans font from the Eduonix website, or you can search for it online via a search engine. Once you've got it, you just need to select all the fonts, right mouse click and then click on Install, and that will install the Open Sans font onto your computer. If you have any questions or comments on the course, please don't hesitate to get in touch with Eduonix, as they will be happy to answer general queries. Also, Flash and ActionScript is quite a challenging topic to learn, so if you have any specific questions about the topics and require personal tuition, again, please don't hesitate to get in touch with Eduonix, as they may be able to provide personal tuition at extra cost. So that summarises what we're going to be doing in this course, and I hope you enjoy it and learn a lot about Flash and ActionScript programming. In the introduction, I showed you an example of a Flash application. So let's now talk a bit more about what Flash is. So Flash is a successful unification of a sophisticated 2D animation software package called Adobe Flash Professional, and that is used in combination with a powerful programming language called ActionScript. And Flash can be used for many different creative projects. For example, it can be used to create desktop software applications. It can also be used by professional animators to create sophisticated animations. It can also be used to create online tools. For example, you could create a tool that interacts with a database. and it can also be used to create an online chat room. And all these are examples of projects that you can create with Flash. And the key advantage of using Flash is that it's easy to deploy onto many different operating systems. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But first I would like to show you some examples of Flash that you may come across in your everyday life. Firstly, you may have come across something called an FLV file, and this is a popular video file format designed to be read by Flash, and it's used by websites such as YouTube. Flash is also commonly used to create interactive banner adverts on websites, and if you've ever played an online game, that has probably been written in Flash. This slide shows you how you would typically go about working with Flash. So you would generally either create graphical assets in Adobe Flash Professional or import them as graphical files. And you may also wish to add additional assets such as sound files. And then you would generally write some ActionScript code to make it all work. And then you would have something called an FLA file. And you can edit your FLA file, and when you've finished editing your FLA file, you can then compile it. And what compile means is to make it compatible with an operating system, or in the case of Flash, you can also make it compatible with the Flash player, which is used on the internet. So as I mentioned, a key advantage of using Flash is that you can compile it for many different platforms. So you can compile it for iOS, which is the Apple iPhone and the Apple iPad. You can compile it for Android. You can compile it in the form of an AIR file for Windows desktop and Macintosh desktop. Or you can compile it in the form of an SWF file for the internet. You may have also come across something called Flex, and this is a different approach to ActionScript programming. So I thought I'd just go over the differences between Flash and Flex. So as I've mentioned, Flash is an animation software package which is used with ActionScript. And the advantage is that less coding or no coding is required for all the graphical aspects of your project. It's also faster when making graphical changes, and you can make use of all the inbuilt drawing and animation functions provided by Adobe Flash Professional. Flex uses ActionScript like Flash, but it doesn't have inbuilt drawing and animation functions. Instead, you use an additional programming language called MXML to define how you want your applications to appear. And this approach is ideal if you are from a programming background, as you'll be more familiar with the approach used. There's also free open source software available to program with, unlike Flash, which is commercial software, and you require a monthly fee to be able to use it. So this slide describes a brief history of Flash. Flash started out life as an animation software package, and originally it didn't have a programming language associated with it at all. It was first sold in 1996 by a company called Macromedia, and this was subsequently taken over by Adobe, and the software is now currently sold by Adobe. Scripting functions were added to the animation package gradually in order to help control the animations, and this eventually became known as ActionScript 1. This programming language was updated to include something called object-oriented programming, and I won't be discussing object-oriented programming in this course. Instead, I will be focusing purely on scripting. And the scripting language that I will be teaching you is the modern day form of the code, which is ActionScript 3. And you actually have to use ActionScript 3 for certain types of programming, such as mobile application programming, as this is incompatible with earlier versions of ActionScript. So this is a summary of what I've told you in this lesson. So as I mentioned, Flash is a union of a powerful programming language called ActionScript and an animation software package called Adobe Flash Professional. And this is used in a wide variety of creative and software projects. I also mentioned that a key advantage of using Flash is that you can deploy it onto many different platforms. And by the end of this course, you will know how to program Flash applications, such as the game that I showed you in the introduction to this course. So in the last lesson, we were discussing how Flash is a combination of an animation software package called Adobe Flash Professional and a programming language called ActionScript. In this lesson, we're going to be downloading Adobe Flash Professional. So the first thing you want to do is load up your internet browser and then put in the URL at the top, which is www.adobe, which is adobe.com/Creative Cloud, which is all one word, .html. And you should find yourself on this page and scroll down until you see where it says Explore the Desktop Apps, and then click on that. And then you'll get a new page which shows you all the different apps that Adobe will let you download. And they'll give you a free 30-day trial on each app. And after that, they'll charge you a monthly fee if you want to continue. So find where it says Flash Professional, and then click on Download Trial. And you probably don't have an Adobe ID yet, so you'll need to click on this button, Sign Up for an Adobe ID. And you'll have to put in your details and sign up. Okay. I will just go back, and you need to find this page again, and you've got your Adobe ID, and then sign in with your username and password. And what it will say is it will ask you to download a software program called Creative Cloud. I already have this installed on my computer, so it's asking me to load up Creative Cloud. So I don't need to do that. But for you it will say run or download or save as this Creative Cloud software, and you want to install that on your computer. The easiest way to do that is to press run if you have the option available. And when it's installed and downloaded, it looks like this. You may first need to sign in to Adobe with this software with your Adobe username and password again, and you may need to click on the Apps button at the top. And you may also, if for any reason it doesn't realise that you want to download Flash Professional, you may have to go down here and find it from these apps. But hopefully it will say at the top, you are currently downloading Flash Professional CC, and there'll be a loading bar next to it, and that will take you anything up to an hour to download that onto your computer. And the reason I have another one here, Flash Professional CS6, That is because I have that installed on my computer as well. And CS6 is the most recent version of the software that you can buy without requiring a monthly subscription. So if you want to buy the software up front, then you'll need to search the internet for a retailer that distributes CS6. And once your software is completely installed, you'll be able to open that up, and it will come up with a window that looks something like this. On yours it will say you've got a 30-day trial, and you just want to start your 30-day trial, and once you finish that, it will ask you to license it, and that will be a monthly payment, as I mentioned. So I'll just click on Continue Trial, and this is what Flash Professional CC looks like. So you can see there's lots of different options, windows, and all kinds of things, and we'll be talking about all this in the next lesson. Right, so if you followed the instructions in the last lesson, you will have downloaded and installed Adobe Flash Professional CC onto your computer. So in this lesson, I just want to go over some of the key features of this software. So I'm going to start by looking at this central window here, and you'll see that when you load up your Flash Professional software. So over on the left-hand side, there are some recent projects, anything you've recently saved. And on the right-hand side, you've got some learning resources, and I would particularly encourage you to look at the Getting Started. And in the middle here, we've got Create New Project, and that's what we really want to do at the moment. Okay, so let's have a look at these Create New options. At the top, you've got HTML5 options, and we're not going to be covering those in this course. So we'll ignore those for the moment and look at the next four. And you recall in the first lesson I gave that I mentioned that a key advantage of Flash is that it can be used to target different operating systems. So this first one, Actionscript 3, targets the internet. The second one targets Windows and Macintosh desktop. The third one targets Android, and the fourth one targets iPhone and iPad. And I'll just mention these bottom four as well. So you've got an ActionScript class, an interface, and a file, and those all relate to object-oriented programming. And this bottom one here, we're also not going to cover in the course, and we're not going to cover any of these, in fact, in the course. The bottom one is relating to programming extra features into Flash Professional CC. So ignore those four at the bottom, ignore the top two as well, and we're going to focus on ActionScript 3. So I can click on ActionScript 3 and create a new project that targets the internet. Alternatively, I can go to File, New, and click ActionScript 3 there. You'll notice that they're the same options, and then I can go OK. And what you will see is a stage, and the stage is what you see when you compile your Flash file. Anything you put on the stage, you'll see when you compile it. But before you put anything on the stage, you really want to save your project. So go File, Save As, and I'm going to call this Project 1. And even before I start on my saved project, I want to do something else. What I want to do is change the layout of Flash Professional CC, because I personally don't like these drawing icons all the way over to the right, and I don't like the timeline being on the bottom. And there's a number of ways you can change the layout of the interface. You can click and drag and look for a blue line. You see the blue line there? If you see the blue line, you can drop it there. You can also resize your panels as much as you want, but I want to do this a different way, so I'm going to put this back at the bottom again. Let's see a blue line, yes, there we go. I'm instead going to use the default layout, and to do that you go to Window, Workspaces, and I'm going to use the classic layout. So Window, Workspaces, Classic, and I just want to resize. You can see that now the tools are on the left hand side, the timeline is at the top, but it's still not quite to my liking because these icons are a bit squashed up. And then to expand them, there's a couple of arrows above those icons. If you hover over it, it says Expand Panels. If you click there, you'll see that the panels expand, and that gives you access to useful features like colour and the library at the bottom. And still one further change I want to make. I want to put my properties on the other side of my colour. And if you make a mistake when you're moving your layout, so you might just put your colour somewhere random over here, properties perhaps above your timeline in a strange place, all you need to do is go to Window, Workspaces, and then Reset Classic, and that will put the panels back to the default for the classic layout. So if I just change it back to how I had it before, with the properties there, and if I just scroll to see my stage a bit better. Okay, so I'll just mention briefly this properties window, because it is one of the most useful windows in Flash. And you can see at the moment it's giving the properties of the stage, so it's giving the size of the stage in pixels, and frames per second, the speed of the animation. If I were to click on one of the drawing tools, the properties changes to show me the properties of the drawing tools, and in fact anything you click on or have selected on the stage, it will give you properties of that. And I also want to mention another key feature, the timeline. The timeline allows you to animate things. So all these different squares that I'm clicking on at the moment represent a frame in an animation. So you can imagine when these are all played, so they go from frame to frame to frame quickly, then you'll get a nice smooth animation. And we'll be looking at that in a later lesson. And really that's all I want to say in terms of summarising the features of Flash. There's clearly many other features in these drop-down menus and in these panels that I haven't talked about, but we'll be talking about those in later lessons. But before I finish, I just want to quickly summarise what I've done, so I'm just going to cross that off. And you can see we've got the start window again. So what I've done here is created a new Actionscript 3 file, and then I've saved it by going File, Save As, Project 1, Save. And I've just changed the layout of my screen using Window, Workspaces, Classic. Okay, so in the next lesson we're going to be looking at our first compiled Flash project. So in the last lesson we learned how to create a new Actionscript project to target the internet, which you can do in this default window and click on Actionscript 3, or you can click on File, New, Actionscript 3 and click on OK. And then I showed you how to save using File, Save As, and then give it a file name. So in this lesson we're going to be using the file that we've just created to create a compiled Flash file. And the only thing that's going to be on our compiled Flash file is some text. And you remember in the first lesson I gave, compile just means to change the editable Flash file into something that the computer can read and interpret and display. Okay? So I'm just going to put some text onto the stage and watch the properties window when I click it. When I click text, the properties window has changed to show some text options. And the font I'm going to use is Open Sans. You might want to use a different font, but you can select it under that window. So just click on the stage and write some text. And then when you're done writing some text, change your text tool to your selection tool, and your text is selected automatically. And you can move your text. And over here you can increase the size of the text. If you click on where it says 12 points and drag, you can change the size. Or you can single click and put in a number to change the size of your font. And I'm also going to change the colour of my font, which I could do in the properties window using the colour box there, or I can use the colour window over here, and I'm just going to change it to blue. I also want my text to be centered on the stage, and make sure Align to Stage is clicked on in the Align menu over here. So if you're not on the Align menu, click on the Align, make sure Align to Stage is ticked, and then to center it in the middle of the stage, click on Align Horizontal Center, and then Align Vertical Center. And now my text is right in the middle of the stage. And I also want my text centered inside the text box, which I can use there. So I've aligned it to the center. And one additional thing I want to do is to use this option called Embed. Because if I don't use this option, and I have a font called Open Sans, which may not be on your computer, and then I compile this Flash file with text using Open Sans, and then you download it from the internet, you won't be able to see this font that I've used because it won't be installed on your computer. So to get around that problem, you have to embed the font that you use inside your Flash file so that it will always display correctly. And it's very important to remember this. Whenever you're using text, use the embed function. And you want to embed at least uppercase, lowercase, numerals, and punctuation. And there's more things you can embed as well, but I'm just going to stick with those four. And I'm going to go OK. So I've embedded the Open Sans font inside my Flash file, and it will now display correctly on everyone's computer. So I'm quite happy with that, and I'm going to do a test compilation. And the way you do that is to click on Control and then click on Test. So this shows how your text will appear and how it will behave. And if I click and drag, you can see my text is selectable. And it so happens that I don't want it to be selectable. So I'm going to close the test, and then I'm going to go to this icon here, which says the text is selectable. I'm going to deselect that. Then I'm going to do another test. And now if I click and drag, it is no longer selectable. And I'm quite happy with the way that that test has come out. And you can see it's been called project1.swf, which is the compiled file, as opposed to project1.fla, which is the editable file. So if I cross that out, I'm going to now compile it properly. I'm going to publish it for the internet. Although first I'm going to save the file, File, Save. So to publish it, you can go File, Publish directly, or to make sure that you're saving it in the correct directory, and to look at other options, you can go Publish Settings. So under Publish Settings, you can select your publishing directory, and that's the publishing directory I want. and you can also change the Flash player. I'm going to choose an earlier Flash player. The reason for that is that if you leave it on Flash player 16 and the person who downloads your file only has, say, Flash player 14, it might cause problems because you're targeting a more modern version. So I'm going to target Flash 11.2. And I'm going to go OK to save my publish settings. If you just click on publish and then cancel, what you'll find is your publish settings will return back to the way they were before, which isn't what you want. So go OK first. And then you can publish in your publish settings by clicking on the publish button, or for speed you can just go File, Publish. And you should find that there's an HTML file inside the project inside the folder that you specified. So I'm going to double click on my project HTML file, and it's coming up with an error. It's just vanished. Let's just get that back up again. The reason it's saying this is because it's not from a live website. If it was from a live website, it wouldn't show this error. So I'm going to say allow blocked content, and there you can see my Flash file inside an HTML file, and you can upload this to a website and have your Flash incorporated inside web pages. Okay, so in summary then, we've used a text tool, which is on the left hand side with the icons here, and we've just clicked on the stage, added some text and changed some of the options, and the all important thing to remember is the embed button, and the reason for doing that is to make sure that you store the font inside your Flash file. And then once I'd finished playing around with my text on the stage, I decided to go File, Publish Settings to make sure that I was saving in the correct directory, and then I went File, Publish, which put an HTML file into the directory that I specified, and that has created my published, compiled Flash file. And in the next lesson we'll be talking about animations. In the last lesson we were discussing using text in Flash, and we were also compiling our first Flash file. And we will be revising these things in this lesson. But first of all, I just want to show you an example of an animation in Flash. An animation is just a series of static frames shown quickly to give an illusion of movement. So I'll show you the different frames of this animation that I've set up. There's the second frame, the third frame, the fourth frame. You can see in each frame the static image is slightly different from the one previously. And if you play them quickly together, so I'll do so now by pressing enter, you can see that it's created an illusion of movement by making those frames display quickly one after the other. And we'll be setting something up like this in a later lesson, but today I want to show you a much more simple animation which consists of just 3 frames, and that's a button animation. And I'll just show you an example I made earlier before we start making it ourselves. So I'll just go Control and then Test, which, as you'll recall, is a test compilation. So it's just produced that text compilation, and the button is here. It's got an off state and an on state and a down state. Now you notice the text changed as well up here. That's code that I've added. If I click on the button, the text changed. We're going to be doing that in the lesson after next. Next lesson we're discussing ActionScript. The lesson after that we're going to link our button that we make in this lesson to this text over here. Okay, but that's not for today. Today we just want to make this button. So the first thing we need to do is to go File, New, ActionScript 3, and then go OK. So we've got a new ActionScript project which we should save by going File, Save As, Project 2. Okay, so we want to create a button out of some text. So it's a good idea to click on the text icon, and it's all nicely set up for me at the moment. We've got the blue colour, 80 point size, and Open Sans font. So I just need to click on the stage and then type my text, which I'm going to write. Let's click. And you can see there's not enough room for the word there, so go to the box at the bottom right. You can see how it's changed to be a resize icon. I'm just going to click and drag until I see the whole word, and then I'm going to click on the selection tool and just move it a bit. And you'll recall in the last lesson the key thing you need to do when you add some text is to click on the embed button and then click on uppercase, lowercase, numerals and punctuation at the very least. You might be using some more characters as well. And then go OK. So the reason I embed fonts, as you recall, is because I need to put the font inside the Flash file so that the person who downloads the Flash file can see the font even if they don't have the font installed on their system. And the reason, by the way, I use Open Sans is because Open Sans is not a copyrighted font. If you embed a copyrighted font, you might be breaching copyright. So it's worthwhile searching for Open Sans on the internet and using it in your project. Okay, so we've got our text on the screen. We now want to convert that into a button. So to do that, make sure it's selected and then go Modify, Convert to Symbol, and make sure button is highlighted in the drop-down menu, and then give it a name. I'm going to call mine My Button. And then I'm going to click OK. Now it still looks pretty much the same. There's not been much change on the stage. It still looks like it's just a bit of text rather than a button, but it is in fact a button. And the reason you can tell it's a button is because in the Properties menu it now says Button Instance of My Button. But in the timeline it's not showing an up state, an over state and a down state as you might expect for a button. And the reason for that is that the timeline is actually showing the timeline of the main stage rather than of the button. So you need to go inside the button to see its own timeline, and the way you do that is by double-clicking on the button. You can see in this title menu here, My Button has appeared, and then these up, over, down and hit states have appeared as well. To go back to the stage, click on Scene 1. To go inside the button, double-click on your button, and you'll see it appear there. Okay, so I now want to add some over and an over and a down state to this button. So to do that, I want to right mouse click on over and insert keyframe. And that's just copied the frame from up into over. And I just want to change the colour of the over to green. So now there's two different states there. There's an up state and an over state. And I just want to put in a down state as well. Right mouse click again on the down, insert keyframe, change the colour of the text. And then there's a hit frame as well. and I also want to create a keyframe there, but rather than changing the text colour, I'm going to use the rectangle tool. I'm going to put a rectangle over the top, because what the hit frame does is it defines the area where the button is active on the screen. So when you put your cursor over the rectangle area, the button will change from the up state to the over state. Okay, so I'm now going to change back to scene 1. The rectangle, by the way, won't show up on the screen, which you'll see in a second if I test it. Control test to compile it, and there is the button in the over state, the up state, and the over state is the green, and the down state is the orange. Okay, so I've created a button in that Flash file. Might be worth just quickly going over that again for you from the start, because that's quite complicated. If I just delete it. So I went text. I'll just write the text on the screen and make it so you can see it. So there I've got my text. I now want to change it to a button. Modify, convert to symbol. Button is selected. I'll call this one my button 2. Double click on my button 2 to get into it. You can see the up, the over, the down states. To add them, you go right mouse click, insert keyframe, then change the colour of them, and the same with the down state, insert keyframe, change that to orange, and then put a nice rectangle into the hit state. Back to scene 1 to the stage, control test, and you've got your button. Okay, so save your project, and in the next lesson we're going to be talking about Actionscript, because we want to link our button to that text change there using Actionscript in the lesson after next. Recall in the last lesson we were saying that we were going to link a button that we created to a text change which required some coding. So I'm going to discuss first of all the code we're going to use, this Actionscript. So Actionscript is a high-level programming language. I just want to mention high-level because you might come across this term. High-level just means it's in a form that we can understand rather than in a form that a computer understands, which is low-level. So I prefer to use high-level programming languages, and so do most people for most projects. Flash is compiled to bytecode, which can be read by a virtual machine. So bytecode, I'll just say what compile is again. Compile is to change your editable file into a form that the operating system and your computer can understand. Flash doesn't quite go that far. Flash compiles to bytecode, which instead of being interpreted by your operating system, is interpreted by this virtual machine, which is called Flash Player, or it can be called Adobe Air, depending on whether it's on the internet or if it's a desktop or mobile application. And the advantage of using a virtual machine rather than compiling directly for a specific operating system is that virtual machines can be made to run on different operating systems, allowing your Flash programs to run on those operating systems as well. So Actionscript uses a stringent syntax to give instructions to the computer to manipulate variables. If you don't use the syntax correctly, it will generate errors, and we'll look at debugging errors later in the course. So variables are stored data in the computer's memory and can have different types, including numbers, characters, booleans. Boolean is just a fancy way of saying true or false, and we'll be using a boolean in our mini project with our button. And as you'll see, all ActionScript statements end with a semicolon instead of a full stop, as you might expect in a normal English statement. ActionScript statements instead end with this semicolon. So the original function of ActionScript was to control animations, and I've put some examples here, such as go to and play 1 says go to frame 1 and start playing, stop says stop playing. So why don't we look at this in action in a real Flash file. So you remember I showed you this in the last lesson. I want to first test to see how it compiles, so I'll go Control Test, and you can see it's looping there automatically. So instead of looping here, I want it to stop when it's finished. So if I go back to my slide, the one that I need to use is stop. And I want it to stop at frame 30 when it ends there, instead of going back to the beginning automatically. So I need to put my stop statement into frame 30. But I'm not going to put it into this square that I've highlighted. Instead I'm going to hover over a new layer, and that button there where my cursor is at the moment. I'm going to click there, and it's created a new layer where I'm going to put my ActionScript. And I'm going to rename this new layer by double clicking on it. I'm going to call it Actions. And I'm going to go then to frame 30 and right mouse click and insert a keyframe. And what that allows me to do is to put ActionScript specifically into frame 30, otherwise it will all just go into frame 1. So you need to put the keyframe in there so that you can use frame 30. So Actions you can access by going to the right mouse button and then clicking on Actions at the bottom there. And then I'm just going to type in stop and semicolon to end the statement. And cross that off again, and you can see there's a little A there which says there's some ActionScript in that frame now. And if I control and test that movie now, you can see it's ended where I told it to at the last frame. And we could test out some different statements. So perhaps go to and stop 5. Instead of stopping at the end, we could change it to go to and stop 5 and see what that does. So back in here, back to Actions by right mouse clicking, and then go to and stop 5. So what it should do now is go all the way through the animation, and when it finds the go to and stop 5, it should then go to frame 5. And to distinguish frame 5, let's write some text on frame 5. Frame 5. Just to make sure it's doing what it really should be doing. So we've got frame 5. This is not quite showing the whole 5 there. I think I should just reduce the size of the text a bit. There we go. Okay, so the only place where that frame 5 text is on is frame 5. So I'm going to control and test my movie and see if it goes to frame 5, and there it is. There we go, frame 5. So it all works as expected. So let's go back to our slideshow. So I've shown you those examples, or a couple of them. So let's now talk about the dot syntax. The dot syntax is used to access objects in a hierarchy. So one hierarchy you'll come across in Flash is the display hierarchy. The stage, which you see, the white main stage, that's the top of the hierarchy, of the display object hierarchy. And for example, if you had a main container and a red square inside that hierarchy, then you could locate your red square by using this dot syntax. Stage.mainContainer.red square refers to a red square inside a container inside the stage. And there's more with dot syntax. So dot syntax is used to access properties, which is another way of saying variables associated with objects. You remember variables are data which is just stored in the computer. And the dot syntax is also used to access functions, and we'll be talking more about this in later lessons. But I've just given two examples of properties, and these are properties that refer to the stage.stageHeight, which gives the stage height, and the stage.stageWidth, which gives the stage width. And you can use a function called trace to view values like this, like the stage height. So you can use the trace to view the values that are stored in them when you do a test compilation. So let's try that out. And we'll try it out in a new ActionScript project. And just go straight into the actions. And I want to trace the stage.stageHeight. And you can see the little help that's come up here. So I'm just going to click on that. Okay, so trace stage.stageHeight should show me what the value of the stage height is when I test compile it. And you should be able to see in the properties of the stage, I just clicked on the stage there, the stage height should be 550, so let's see if it is. Control, test. I'm not going to worry if it isn't. For some reason it's saying 400. Okay, yeah, so the stage height, yeah, is 400, so it's width by height. Yep, so that is working correctly. So let's go back to our presentation. So in summary, ActionScript started as a way to control animations. And ActionScript control statements, we've had a look at some of those. We've had a look at go to and stop, and we also had a look at stop. But there's also a couple more, go to and play, which will send you to a specific frame and then start playing. And then there's play as well, which just says play. You can use the dot syntax to access properties, functions, and objects in a hierarchy, and we'll be seeing more of that in later lessons. And I've just shown you the trace function, which can be used to test values stored in variables. And in the next lesson, we'll be going back to our button and linking it to a text change. So in the last lesson we were discussing ActionScript, and in the lesson before that I mentioned that we were going to link a button to some text that changed when you clicked on it. So that's what we're going to do in today's lesson. So I'm just going to create a new ActionScript 3 file, and I want to show you how to make the button again, but I'm going to show you a different way to do it, although I'm going to save my file first. So I'm going to save as project 3. So last time I showed you putting text onto the stage and using modify convert to symbol to make a button out of the text. And this time I'm going to do it in a different way. I'm going to use insert new symbol, and I'm going to call it my button again. And you have to make sure that it's got button selected, and you're presented with an empty symbol that you then have to add text to. So click on the text icon, change the colour over, it's 80 points, which is what I want. So I'm just going to write click in there as last time, and the same as last time, it's going to be expanded. And the font needs embedding again, all as usual, but then there's something different I have to do if I use this strategy. I have to move the click to the registration point, the 0, point on for this particular symbol. I don't have to do that, but it's good practice to align what you're adding to the origin. So one way of doing it is by moving it so that the lines appear. Another way of doing it is by pressing on the X and putting 0 in, and the Y putting 0 in, and there it is aligned to the 0 point. And then from here it's the same as last time. Right mouse click, insert keyframe, and then change the colour, and then insert another keyframe and change the colour again, and then insert the hit frame and draw a nice rectangle over it to make an active area for the button. And now there's one small difference again. If I go back to up, it looks like there is a button on the stage. If I test the movie by going Control Test, you see that there's in fact nothing on the stage. If I go back to the stage, you'll see there is actually nothing there. So where's my button gone? I inserted new symbol instead of creating something on the stage and converting it. So what's happened is it's gone into the library, and I have to drag it out of the library and put it onto the stage, and I can align it to the centre like that, and then if I test it, it's now on the stage and it works. So I'm just going to move that down a bit. I'm going to move the Y upwards. You can also click and drag, and then I'm going to put some more text on the stage, and this is the text that's going to change when I click on the button. I'm going to make this black text. I'm just going to write hello in that text. I'm going to increase the size of it, and I'm going to align it in the middle there. And I don't actually need to use embed this time because it's the same font and it's already embedded. So once you've embedded the font, you don't need to embed it again, even if you add some more text. But what you do need to do in this case, because we're using ActionScript, we need a way of referring to these two things on the stage. So I need a way of referring to this text, and the way I do that is to make sure that dynamic is selected, and then I need to give it a name, and I'm going to call it my text, and I'm going to call this my button, and these are case sensitive instance names. And now that I've given them instance names, I'm going to add a new layer for my actions like I did last time by clicking there, and I'm going to call it actions like I did in the last lesson. And I'm going to click on that frame, but instead of going right mouse button and clicking on actions, I'm going to go Windows Actions instead. So I'm just showing you that there's usually a different way of doing something in Adobe Flash. Usually two different ways of doing things. So if you prefer one way of doing things, then I suggest you do it the way you prefer. So I want this text to change when you click on the button. So the first thing I need to do is to tell ActionScript that I want this button to respond to a mouse click. And I've given this button an instance name, my button. So my button, and then I need to tell it that I want it to respond to mouse events. So I'm going to use the dot in syntax, which we discussed last time, and then I'm going to use this thing called Add Event Listener. Okay, so I've added an event listener to my button, and the type of event listener is a mouse event, and it's a mouse event dot click. It could be a mouse event dot mouse down or mouse up. There's various different types of mouse events. The fact that I put click on there means you have to click the button, and then I've written a function that it's going to call, and I could have written any name I felt like here. I could put on clicking, or on clicker, or anything I felt like there, just in the same way as I could have named my button whatever I wanted to. But I need to make sure that my syntax is correct, so I put these parentheses and this comma and this semicolon all in the correct place, and I spell everything correctly. And if I don't do any of these things perfectly correctly, then it will say that there's an error. So you can expect errors to appear in your ActionScript quite frequently when you're learning it, because it is very, very stringent, as I mentioned in the last lesson. Now, because I've said I want to call a function called onClick when my button is clicked with the mouse, I have to write the function into this code. Otherwise, again, it will say there's an error, there's a function missing. And the way I just write a function is just to say function onClick. And I have to put this mouse event into there. And then you generally put that on the end. Could be different from void. Whether you put void or something else there is you'll learn later on. Again, this is all very stringent syntax. You have to put your mouse event in there because there's a mouse event there. That has to spell the same way as that, and it has to start with the keyword function, and it has to have these curly parentheses and also these round parentheses in these specific places, and if it's not all spot on, you will have an error. So now I've got a function which will call, now I've got some code which will call this function whenever the mouse is clicked. And I can use our favourite trace function that we met last time. So I can put it works, and if I test it, control test, when I press this click, the trace works. So that function, when I click my button, the function is called, and this statement is executed. It works, okay? That's not what I want it to do. What I want it to do is to change the text from hello to world. So I'll click on hello. Remember, I called it my text. So I'm going to copy and paste that there. Copy and paste wherever possible, because it minimises the chances that you're making a spelling error and introducing an error into your code. And now I'm going to use the dot syntax to access the text property of that text field. And the text property will allow me to change the text to world. So when I click the button now, it should change from hello to world. So let's test that out. And it does. But if I click it again, it doesn't change back to hello, which is what I had a couple of lessons ago. So I'm going to make it so that it changes from hello to world and then back to hello again. And what I'm going to use to do that is a Boolean variable. And I'm going to give it a name. I could give it anything I want. Latching, latchy, whatever I felt like. But I do need to use this keyword Boolean spelled correctly. And then I could do this, or I could simply set it to false. And if you remember last time, I said it could be either true or false. So I could have made it true if I wanted, but it couldn't be anything other than true or false. It will only hold those two different possible states. Now I'm going to do something a bit fancy in here. I'm going to say if latch is false, then turn the text into world and make latch true. But if it's not false, if it's true instead of false, because that's the only two things it can possibly be, then make myText.text equal to hello again. And then change latch back to false. So now when I click on my button, this function is run. Latch to start with is false, so it says if latch is false, turn text into world, then change latch to true, and then it ignores this bit, and then the function ends. And then the next time I click on my button, it runs the onClick function, and it says, latch is now true, so I should ignore this bit of it, and instead run this bit. So now my text.text is hello, and latch is false again, so it's now back to the way it was at the start. So let's test that out. Hello, click, turns to world, click again, it turns to hello, latch is false, click, latch is true, click, latch is false. Now there's one thing missing from this code, although it all works without errors. There are no comments in the code, and a comment is something you can add in just to tell you how the code works, so that when you come back to it later on you understand it, but it doesn't have any effect on how the program works. So I'm going to put a few comments in, but I'll make more comments outside the video, and then I'll put the file somewhere where you can access it at a later date. So I won't write all the comments now, but I'll just show you how a comment is written. So this statement here appeared automatically, so that I can use the mouse event. So I'm just going to put those 2 forward slashes and then say the statement automatically to allow me to use mouse event. So that won't affect how the code operates. I could put a different type of comment into here. A /* and a */ will allow me to write code on more than one line. Sorry, comment. But as I say, I will write more detailed comments to say how this code works, and you can look at it at your leisure and make sure you understand how this works. And we'll be talking more about all aspects of this type of ActionScript in future lessons. So in this lesson I want to give you a project to do which will summarise everything we've done so far. And the project is going to be a web page with a Flash file inside it, and in the Flash file you can see this button. When you click on the button vanishes and makes another button appear, and when I click on the second button, that button vanishes and the original first button appears. So I will want you to do that yourself, but first of all I want to show you how to make a button vanish when you click on it, and that will also remind you how to go through the whole process of creating a button and then compiling it into a website, into a web page. So I'll just minimize that for the moment. So in order to create a new ActionScript file, I need to go File, New, and because I'm targeting a web page, I need to use ActionScript 3, which is already selected, and I need to go OK. And then I need to save it before I do anything else. File, save as. I'll call it Project 4. And so, as I said, I want to show you a button that vanishes when you click on it. So I need to create the button on the stage. So I'm going to click on the text tool, and I'm going to use my blue, and I'm going to type button. Just use the selection tool to get out of the text tool and align it in the middle, and then embed the font to make sure that it's inside the Flash file for when people download it, in case they don't have that font. And so now I've got the text on the stage, it just needs turning into a button, which I do using modify convert to symbol. The type I select as button, and I give it a name. I'll call it my button. And I'm still on the stage at the moment. I need to get inside the button to see the frames. So I double click on it, and there I am inside the button, and the frames are showing up there. So if I right mouse click to create the overstate, I need to insert keyframe. I'll just tell you what happens if you accidentally choose insert blank keyframe. What happens is you got a blank keyframe with nothing in it, and if you want to undo it, you just go remove frame, or you could use an undo function, which is here under the edit menu, so you can repeat and undo to correct mistakes that you've made if you make them. So I'll just go to the over again and right mouse click, insert keyframe, and I will choose a light blue, I think, and I'm going to make my down state, and let's choose that purple, and I want also an active area where you move onto the button and it then shows you that the overstate instead of the upstate. So if I go back to scene 1, which is the stage, and I control test it, you'll see the button works, but it doesn't yet vanish. So in order to get it to vanish, I need to use some ActionScript code. And to use ActionScript code, I want to make a new layer, as you've seen before. I'll double click on the new layer and call it Actions, and then I can right mouse click and go into the Actions, or I can go Window Actions. But to make it work, to make the button work with the ActionScript, I need to make an instance name. I'm going to call it my button, and then copy Control C, paste as Control V, and then use the dot syntax to add an event listener. So I've added a mouse event listener. So when it's when there's a mouse event, when you click on the button, this function will then be executed. So I'll write the function in there. And you'll remember that from last time. Trace it works just to see that it does. And you can see that my ActionScript has gone in the wrong frame. If that happens, copy your ActionScript, or rather cut it, using the right mouse button, go to the right frame and then paste it. So it's now moved from one frame, one layer into the other layer. And I'll just go Control Test to make sure it does work. Click on the button. See in the output panel it says it works. If I click it again, it will work again. It'll work as many times as I click on it. I'll just go back to the timeline and cross that off because I don't want it to say it works. I want the button to vanish. And to do that, I'm going to copy and paste. You can use the right mouse button or Control-C, Control-V according to your preference. I'm going to use the dot syntax to access a property of the My button called visible. And anything you can put on the stage, whether it's a movie clip or a button, will have this property called visible. And it's a Boolean property, which can either be true or false. We met Boolean last time when we used the latch and we created that variable ourselves. But this variable, this property, already exists as part of this button. So this button has a variable called visible inside it. And I'm going to call it false. I'm going to assign it the value false. When I do that, the button will become invisible, and we'll just check that it works using Control Test, and then click the button and the button's vanished. So, one final thing to talk about, well, I mentioned comments as well. You can comment your code to say this visible property is Boolean and has been to false. It's been set to false. So I've just added a little comment in there using 2 forward slashes just to remind me what's going on. But after I've got that working, I really want to go into File, Publish, although I'll check the Publish settings first. I'm targeting a very modern version of Flash. I'll target an older version just in case my targeted version is more modern than the person who is going to download my SWF file. And I think I'm happy with all those options. So I'll click OK and then I'll click on Publish. And I scroll down to Project 4. I've now got a web page which I can look at. And because it's not downloading from a live website, I'm going to have to allow blocked content. Click on the button, it's gone. So, using the information I've just told you, I'd like you to recreate this other project, which is where you click on a button, it vanishes, and the other button appears, and you click on this button, that button vanishes, and the first one appears again. Okay, and there'll be you can access the finished files if you want, and I'll also show you quickly the solution in the next lesson. So, if you're having problems with this project, then let's just have a look at it and see what you ought to be doing. So I've put 2 buttons onto this stage. That should be fairly straightforward. You just need to put 2 sets of text onto the stage and then convert them both into buttons using modify convert symbol as we've seen in previous videos. It's fairly straightforward to name those differently so that they can be referred to in ActionScript. Okay, so and then you'll be wondering what to do next. So there's window actions here. This is the code from the last lesson where I demonstrated a button disappearing. So if I test this movie out, both of them are showing that bottom button doesn't do anything and that top button disappears. So that's the stage that this demonstration is at. I would expect you to be able to get to that point without too much difficulty. And then there's the problem of how do you get one button to make itself disappear and the other button appear. So you might have gone back to project 3 and said, well, there's something possibly similar going on here. When I click this, this changes, and then it changes back when I click on it again. That looks quite similar. You can set it up to look a bit similar, and perhaps I've done that as a deliberate trap to fall into, because it's a good idea to fall into these traps early on. That's a good way to learn. The trap is that you think, oh, okay, there's a latch here that clearly needs moving over into my new code. And so I'll put it in there, because the functionality looks quite similar. And if I look a bit further down, there's an if statement that might need to go in here somehow as well. And then we're thinking, well, how on earth do I get that to work? And the reason it doesn't work is because that's not the approach that you need to take with this particular example. And the reason it doesn't work is because you're relying too heavily on existing code in that case, instead of looking at the program and saying, well, how should this program work? What does it need to do? So what's the key functionality? There's one button here that I need to be able to click on in order to run a function, and there's another button I need to click on to run another function. So each of these buttons has to be linked to an event listener and a function. So we've already got one set up to do that. So what I need to do is to copy and paste a few times, Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V. I've called the second button my button 2. It makes sense to call the other function my onClick 2. So if I copy onClick and turn that into onClick 2, and now what happens is that if I click on either of those buttons, my button should become invisible. So let's test it. I can't test the other one, so if I test it again, and it does appear to be working. You can add a trace function in each one and see them both giving different traces in the output window. But what you need to do is to get one button to appear and the button clicks to vanish when you click on it. So when you click my button, you want my button 2 to become visible. So if I copy and paste, and that's all I need to do there. So my button.visible equals false means the first button will become invisible, and my button.visible equals true means the second button will become visible, and that's when I click on my button. So I click on that, that becomes invisible, that becomes visible. And I want the opposite to happen in onClick 2. So if I just copy from onClick 1 those two and change the false and the true over, and I can test it. There's one thing missing still, and I'll show you what that is. Control test. Initially you can see both of the buttons, and you want the second button actually to be invisible to start with. So if I click on button 2, that's how you want it to look to start off with. And that's easy to do because the code that's outside the functions is all executed straight away when the program is run, because it's on frame 1. If it was on another frame, you have to wait until the playhead got all the way to that frame. Because it's on frame 1, it will run straight away. So if it runs straight away, you can put my button 2.visible equals false, which I've already written there, so I'll copy it and paste it. That sets the second button to be invisible straight away as soon as you start the program. So let's see the difference. With that code in, the button is invisible. If I comment the code out, which means put those two comment lines in, it's back again. So that's the completed program. The only thing left is to publish it using the publish settings and publish. That should be straightforward. That's the hard bit, and it was a deliberate trap that I set. For beginning programmers, the tendency is to rely on existing code, and while that is useful to have the existing code there, you need to adapt it to make sure that you're programming in the functionality that you need in the new program. So I'll add some extra comments to this code and save it so you can have a look and make sure you understand how it works. And we'll be leaving ActionScript for a little while and focusing more on animation and graphics in the next few lessons, and then returning to ActionScript in the lessons following that.